Hello, this is Dr. Lowe, and welcome to today's homework. Our task today is to schematize and translate as accurately as we can a text which represents the first 12 lines of De Inventione as presented in your text, A Cicero Reader. As we get started, you should have at your elbow both a Latin dictionary of some sort. It could be an online dictionary or one that you actually own, along with the notes to De Inventione that I had posted online. You can refer to those notes as we go forward, and it will make our translation, I think, substantially simpler. Now let's get to it, looking at the first sentence. Saepe et multum hoc mecum covatavi, bonine an mali plus atularet hominibus et civitatibus copia decende ac summum eloquentiae studium. So writes Cicero. What does he say? If we need to, we can begin schematizing, looking for a subject. Saepe et multum hoc mecum covitavi. Nothing in the nominative there, so we need to look to our verb. We see that the subject is that I, that ending, a first-person singular perfect of cogito. So I have considered. What have I considered? Hoc. This from hic hoc. I have considered this, and then mecum, with myself. And then two adverbs, often and much. So literally what Cicero has said, I have considered this with myself, often and much. To our ears, that sounds odd. What he is saying, what the Latin means, I have often reflected deeply on this. And the this is the topic. What we see next is bonine an mali plus atularet hominibus et civitabibus copia decendi ac summum eloquentiae studium. This is a little bit odd, something that we need to pay attention to. Bonine an. This ne, obviously, is the enclitic ne, telling us that we are dealing with a question, but we don't see a question mark at the end of the sentence. So what we're dealing with here is an indirect question. And this is an indirect question that basically is answering the question we have. What's the this? What has he considered deeply and frequently? And the answer is whether copia decendi, fluency of speaking, and the highest zeal, and then this dative, for this studium dative, eloquentiae, for eloquence, has brought now more datives, two men and two states, plus more, and then two partitive genitives, more of good or of evil. So the question that has been puzzling Cicero is whether eloquence, the ability to speak well, has brought mankind more good or more evil. And the way he puts that in English is often and much have I considered this with myself, whether fluency and the highest zeal for speaking has brought to men and to states more good or more evil. That's our first sentence. Then he goes on to say, for, then cum here, when I consider or think about the detrimenta, the injuries, re nostrae rei publicae, again a dative, the injuries to our republic, and this et is connecting considero and colligo, two verbs, and I gather where, in mind, What do I gather? The veteres calamitates, the old disasters, the ancient disasters, and then maximarum civitatum, of the great estates. What happens when I start thinking about the injuries to the Republic and those ancient disasters that have befallen great states? Well, Cicero says, video, I see, and then an example of litotes. I see that, non minimum partem, not the least part, invectam, and we have to understand here an essay, it's an indirect statement. I see that not the least part of these problems, of these incommodorum, invectam, that's an infinitive. In the perfect passive infinitive, the essay is frequently dropped. I see that not the least part of these problems have been invejoed, have been brought on, per dissertissimos homines, by or through the most fluent men. So Cicero was saying, it's hard to say whether eloquence has brought more good or more evil to men, when he stops to think on the one hand of many of the problems that have befallen the Roman Republic, and when he stops to think more broadly of the disasters that have befallen even the greatest empires, even the greatest countries. He can see that a lot of that has been brought on simply through fluent men. He is likely thinking not solely, but above all, of the problems Athens faced in the Peloponnesian War, where popular opinion was swayed by various rabble-rousing and very persuasive public speakers. We'll come back to that in class. To continue, cum autem res ab nostra memoria propter vetustatem remotas, ex literarum monumentis repertere instituo multas urbes constituas, plurima bella restincta, firmissima societates, sanctissimas amicitias intellego, cum animi ratione, tum facilius eloquentia comparatis. So, what does he say there? He's noted, as we've already seen, that on the one hand, without doubt, eloquence has brought disaster on cities. But then he goes on to say, cum, when autem, however, instituo, I decide to, there's our subject, I decide to look back on. Res, matters, and these are matters remotas, distant of nostra memoria, from our memory, propter vetustatem, because of their age, and he decides to look back on them, or he decides to research some of these things, ex literarum monumentis, from literary records. It's literally, he's saying from the monuments of records, but he's saying from the literary record. When I look back on matters that we may not recall, and I actually look them up, I do some research, what do I see? Intellego. I understand, and then more indirect statement, that many urbes constituas esse have been founded, plurima bella, restincta esse, that many wars have been ended, and that firmissimas societates, and this example of a syndeton, where we would expect to see an et, that the strongest alliances, firmissimas societates, and the sanctissimas amicitias, and the most revered friendships, I understand that these have been comparatus, essentially kind of put together. Cum animi ratione, both with reason of mind, both by reason, both by formal thought, but then also more easily, more readily, eloquentia, and this is an ablative, parallel to ratione. So what Cicero is telling us in this paragraph is that it's a tough call whether eloquence has brought more good or evil to man. On the one hand, Eloquent orators have been able to appeal to man's baser instincts, and they have brought about real disasters in the past. He says there's no question about that. But he says when you reflect a little more deeply, when you do some historical research and look at the literary record, what you find is that eloquence has done lots of good things too. It's led to the founding of cities. It's led to the end of wars. It's led to the confirmation of very strong alliances and very solid friendships. And he says that this has happened not only because people were thinking rationally, but even if they happened all the more easily because people were swayed eloquentia, in the ablative, by eloquence. Hope that helps. We'll come back and take a more detailed look at it tomorrow.